It was raining lightly the night Elijah Moore stepped onto the empty subway platform. The city looked different after midnight, quieter, colder, more honest. The neon lights reflected off the wet ground like broken promises. Elijah adjusted the strap of his work bag on his shoulder and checked the time. 12:47 a.m. Another double shift done. Another day survived. He waited alone. A few minutes later, footsteps echoed from the tunnel entrance. A white man in his late 30s appeared, wearing a clean jacket and expensive shoes. He glanced at Elijah, then immediately looked away. Elijah felt the shift in the air before anything happened. He always did. There was a certain silence that followed him into spaces, a pause that didn't happen for others. The train was delayed. An announcement crackled overhead explaining technical issues. The man sighed loudly and paced back and forth, glancing at Elijah now and then. Each look lasted a little longer than the last. Finally, the man stopped near a security camera and crossed his arms. "You waiting for the same train?" he asked. "Yes," Elijah replied calmly. The man nodded but didn't move away. Instead, he leaned toward the camera and spoke loudly into his phone. "Yeah, I'm on the platform. There's this guy here. I don't know. He's kinda sketchy." Elijah froze. He wanted to react. Wanted to ask what exactly was sketchy about standing and waiting. But experience had taught him the rules. Stay calm, stay quiet, stay alive. 2 minutes later, a security guard arrived. "What's going on here?" the guard asked. The man pointed at Elijah. "Him. He's been staring at me." Elijah took a breath. "I haven't said a word to you." The guard looked at Elijah from head to toe. "ID. For what?" Elijah asked. "Just show me." Elijah handed it over. The guard studied it longer than necessary. Then, without handing it back, he asked, "Why are you here this late?" "I work nights." "Where?" "At the hospital. I'm a respiratory technician." The guard raised an eyebrow. "You got proof?" Elijah felt something crack inside his chest. "Why does he need proof?" a voice said from behind them. Both men turned. A woman stood at the top of the stairs, umbrella in one hand, grocery bags in the other, Asian mid-40s. Tired eyes, but sharp focus. "He said he's waiting for the train," she continued. "That's not a crime." The guard hesitated. "Ma'am, this doesn't involve you." "It does when profiling starts," she replied. The man in the jacket scoffed. "I was just being cautious." The woman looked at him. Cautious of what? His skin. Silence fell like a weight. The train finally arrived with a loud metallic shriek. Doors opened. People stepped out. More passengers filled the platform. The guard handed Elijah his ID back, annoyed, just bored. Elijah walked onto the train without another word. Inside, he sat near the door. The man and the woman boarded too, sitting on opposite ends. The rain streaked the windows as the train moved forward. Elijah stared at his reflection, thinking about his father. His father had warned him about nights like this, about being careful, about swallowing his pride. "You'll be guilty before proven innocent," his father used to say, "so make sure you live long enough to prove anything." At the next stop, a group of teenagers laughed loudly as they boarded. One of them bumped into Elijah, then muttered, "Watch it, man." Elijah opened his mouth to apologize, an old habit, but stopped himself. Why was he always apologizing? Across the aisle, the woman watched him carefully. When the teens moved on, she leaned slightly toward him. "You okay?" she asked. Elijah nodded. "I'm used to it." She frowned. "That doesn't make it right." "No," he agreed. "It doesn't." They rode in silence for a few stops. Then, without warning, the train jolted and stopped between stations. Lights flickered. An announcement echoed. "Temporary delay. Please remain calm." Groans filled the car. The man in the jacket stood up, annoyed. Unbelievable. Minutes passed, then more. A faint smell of smoke began to spread. People panicked. Someone shouted. A child started crying. Elijah stood immediately. "There's an emergency intercom," he said. "We need to report this." The man laughed nervously. "Yeah. And you know that how?" Elijah didn't answer. He moved toward the end of the car, opened a panel, and used the intercom correctly on the first try. The driver's voice responded immediately. "We have possible electrical smoke," Elijah said clearly. "Car 3. We need assistance." "How do you know what to say?" the driver asked. Elijah replied calmly, "I work in emergency medicine." The car went quiet. Instructions followed. Passengers were guided to remain seated. Ventilation adjusted. The smell faded. Within minutes, emergency crews arrived at the next station. Everyone was escorted off safely. On the platform, chaos settled into relief. A paramedic approached Elijah. "You handled that well." Elijah nodded. "Just doing my job." The man in the jacket stood nearby, pale now. He avoided Elijah's eyes until the woman spoke. "You accused him of being dangerous," she said sharply, "but he kept you safe." The man swallowed. "I didn't mean yes, you did," she interrupted. "You meant exactly what came to mind." He looked at Elijah finally. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I was wrong." Elijah studied him. "An apology doesn't erase the fear you caused." The man looked down. "I know," he said, "but I'll remember this." Days later, a local news article surfaced. "Subway passenger prevents emergency through quick action." Elijah's name was mentioned briefly. No photo, no dramatic praise. Just facts. At work, his supervisor called him in. "I heard about the train incident," she said. "You did well, thank you." She hesitated. "You know, not everyone would have listened to you." Elijah met her eyes. "I know." That night, Elijah rode the subway again. Same platform, same lights. This time, he wasn't alone. A young black boy stood nearby with his mother, holding a school backpack and yawning. The boy looked up at Elijah and smiled. Elijah smiled back. No fear, no suspicion, just a moment of shared existence. And for the first time in a long while, Elijah felt something close to hope, not because racism was gone, but because it had been confronted and survived. The days after the subway incident passed quietly, but something inside Elijah Moore had shifted. At the hospital, patients thanked him the same way they always did, unaware of the weight he carried under his calm professionalism. He checked oxygen levels, adjusted ventilators, spoke softly to frightened families. Saving lives was expected of him there. Being believed outside those walls was never guaranteed. One evening, as his shift ended, a senior doctor stopped him in the hallway. "Elijah," she said, "I read the report about the subway." Elijah tensed slightly. "Yes, ma'am." She studied him carefully. "You didn't have to step in, I know," he replied. "But no one else was." She nodded slowly. "That's what worries me." Later that night, Elijah waited at a bus stop instead of taking the subway. Rain fell again, light and steady. A police car slowed beside him, then stopped. The window rolled down. "Everything all right?" The officer asked. Elijah didn't answer immediately. He forced himself to breathe evenly. "Yes." "Where you headed?" "Home." The officer watched him for a moment too long, then drove off without another word. Elijah remained standing there, soaked, angry, but silent. The next week, the woman from the subway, the one who had spoken up, found him. He was surprised to see her waiting near the hospital entrance, holding a coffee cup. "I didn't know how else to reach you," she said apologetically. "I may, Elijah. I keep thinking about that night," May said. "About how easily things could have gone wrong." "They usually do," Elijah replied. She hesitated. "I teach sociology at the university. Next week, I'm speaking about racial profiling. Would you be willing to come? You don't have to talk. Just be there." Elijah almost said no. He was tired of explaining his existence, tired of telling stories that people consumed and forgot. But then he remembered the little boy on the platform. "I'll come," he said. The lecture hall was full. Students whispered as May spoke about systems, bias, and fear disguised as caution. Then she looked toward Elijah. "This," she said, "is what courage actually looks like." Elijah stood slowly, every eye in the room fixed on him. "I didn't do anything heroic," he said. "I did what any trained professional would do. The only unusual part is that some of you wouldn't have believed me if things had gone worse." Silence filled the room. Weeks passed. The subway authority quietly updated its emergency training protocols, citing community feedback. News moved on. It always did. One night, months later, Elijah was back on the same platform where it all began. Same flickering lights, same echoing tunnel. A man collapsed near the tracks. People shouted. Panic returned. This time, no one hesitated when Elijah ran forward. Someone shouted, "He's a medic." Another voice added, "Give him space." Elijah worked fast, steady hands, clear instructions. When emergency crews arrived, they nodded in recognition. As the man was taken away, people looked at Elijah differently. Not with fear, with trust. Elijah sat on the bench afterward, exhausted. May stood nearby. "You changed something," she said quietly. Elijah shook his head. "Maybe for one night." She smiled faintly. One night is how it starts. A train arrived. People boarded, no stares, no accusations, just passengers. As Elijah stepped inside, he realized something important. Racism didn't disappear because of one moment, but silence did. And sometimes that was enough to let the truth breathe. The doors closed. The train moved forward. So did he.